This is the Auburn Podcast. Happy Labor Day, everyone. Sorry, this pod is getting out a little bit later than normal. Planned on doing it yesterday. Long story short, had to file a police report. Someone hit my wife's car, so everything's good. Everybody's safe and all, but I was just kind of threw a wrench into, you think you got your day scheduled out, and then you never know what's going to happen. So today, we are going to hit on some questions that people have asked me on Twitter. Of course, lots of offensive line talk. And I touched on this a little bit in the exclusive podcast that came out right after the game ended on Saturday. And just as far as previewing today's podcast, I'm going to put that at the tail end. This will be the only time. I just kind of want you to know what you're getting. And also just keep in mind, there will also be a Saturday morning podcast that you'll have access to for as low as $1 a month. I'd really appreciate it, guys. I think it's worth it. And several other people do as well. It's not a lot to you, and it really helps me out a bunch. All right, so looking at Twitter, and you can follow me on Twitter at Zac Blackerby. I put my first Auburn GIF thread up on Twitter, and Auburn fans seem to really like that. But let's see. Joel asks us on Twitter, what happened to Mike Horton? He seemed like the lineman we could count on. I still believe in him, but he took a bit of a step back. I don't disagree at all. I really think the whole interior of the offensive line struggled on Saturday against Washington. The past few months, I've been asking and saying, hey, they can't replace Vita Vea just by snapping their fingers. And those guys weren't Vita Vea, but they were a pretty dang good defensive line. Now, I can hear some people saying, well, how do we know that? Because Auburn's offensive line could be awful. I guess that is true in theory. The interior offensive line, the two guards in the center, they got blown off the ball time and time again. And, a lot of people pointing fingers at Cam Martin. I did a little bit immediately after the game. But, his 22 carries for 80 yards, he made it work despite Washington defensive linemen being all over the backfield. And, Auburn has to prepare for this season really to win two games, and it's Georgia and Alabama. I don't think they are going to face a defensive line as good as Washington's until they take on Georgia at the end of the year. Now, I know a lot of fans watched LSU last night, and a lot of fans suddenly become worried about that Week 3 matchup against LSU. We'll see. I'm skeptical on that offense, just like I've been all summer. If you listen to the show over the offseason, you know my thoughts on that. But going back to Joel's question, what happened to Mike Horton? I don't know. But he did not seem to be as consistent as we had seen in the past. The tackles on Saturday, I was very impressed with. I thought Prince Tega and Jack Driscoll, I thought they looked good. I thought the bookend tackles were great. Kaleb Kim, I thought he would be better. Marquell Harrell was okay. Mike Horton was okay. But on the plays where Auburn's offense struggled, a lot of it had to do with the interior offensive line just getting beat off the football. Can they fix that? Yes, they can. And I talked about this in the exclusive podcast, but I really think if the offensive line goes out and dominates Alabama State, I think confidence is such a big deal. I do, and they should be able to steamroll those guys. Now, if they go out and don't do that against Alabama State this Saturday, I think it changes things, right? I obviously think that changes things, and then that could hurt you. It's like, oh, man, we can't move these guys that Auburn wouldn't even recruit on an off year, So, yeah. All right, Big Trav tweets at us saying, do you think Boobie Whitlow will earn the starting job soon? When Boobie Whitlow ran in the touchdown, the go-ahead touchdown at the end of the game, I said out loud, he just won the starting running back job. Now, we may not see the fruits of that immediately against Alabama State, But if I had to predict who gets the first carry against LSU, I'm saying Boobie Whitlow. Now, can Cam Martin do things that other backs on this roster can't? Yes. Yes, he can. He can attack the edges better than any back on this roster. But that's not how you get a crazy amount of yards against Washington. That's not how you run the football against LSU. It's not how you run the football against Alabama and Georgia. It's not. And those are the games that Auburn has to win going into the season. Could Cam Martin be good against Texas A&M? I think so. Could they be good against Tennessee? Yes. But can Boobie Whitlow do things that Cam Martin can't? Yeah. And we knew this going into the season. I mean, it's not like it's like, oh, they're different backs. I mean, obviously we knew that. But do I expect Boobie Whitlow will earn the starting job soon? He may have won it on Saturday. When it was 3rd and 2 and Auburn needed a first down to ice the game, what did they call? They didn't even, it wasn't even a dive to Boobie Whitlow. They went Wildcat, put him at quarterback, direct snapped it to Boobie Whitlow, and trusted him. Jarrett Stidham didn't even touch the football on one of the most important plays of the game because it's clear they trusted Whitlow to get it done. I think that says so much. You know, you can listen to what they say in press conferences and after practice and, you know, in the pregame shows and all of that. But who do they give the football when it matters the most? And when it was kind of 3rd and long, a little longer than what you would think would be a pass, or excuse me, a little longer than what they would think would be a run, they give him the football, and he has a heck of a run to score. And then when it's 3rd and 2, and they know if they get a first down, they start the season with a top 10 victory. And they gave it to him. And they didn't give it to anyone else. They didn't give it to Jarrett Stidham for an RPO. They didn't give it to Jarrett Stidham to even hand the football off to Boobie Whitlow. They gave it strictly to Boobie Whitlow, and the Boobie Cat is what Twitter is calling it, the Wildcat. So, yes, I do think Whitlow will be the starting running back soon. Does that surprise me a little bit? Yes, because my thing has been, you know, I was higher on Cam Martin than other people. And do I think Cam Martin would be better if the offensive line was better? Yes. He's not going to create his own space outside of using his speed to have separation. I think Whitlow can create his own yards in different ways. You saw his patience on that 3rd and 2. You saw his strength on the go-ahead touchdown run. It's a good combination, and he knows how to use it early in his career. And that's what you want. Brad Collins tweets, Kim seemed to struggle at times as Grimes or Gus opened the center position back up now that Brahms is healthy. I think you have to. Now, I don't know exactly how healthy Brahms is. I know he's getting close. I don't know if he's ready to play right away. But yeah, I think you have to do that for 2 reasons. One, is the competition is going to continue to make Kaleb Kim better. And 2, you've got to put the best group of 5 guys on the field at the same time. I hope the Mike Horton to center talk is done. And I know it was happening. I really think that was just an emergency situation that they were preparing for. I really, really hope that's done. That was not a conversation that I really thought was relevant. But if I'm wrong there, it will be relevant. But yes, I think they may not say, hey, we're opening it back up. But Brahms knows. He watched the game. He knows that Kim struggled. And he knows that a big reason why Kaleb Kim earned the job is because he got hurt. I mean, Brahms is in aviation. He's a smart guy. Friend of the program, Rich Perkins, sends me a question. We all knew there would be questions about the O-line and Gus's ability to relinquish control of the play calling completely to Lindsey. Keeping all of that in mind, is peanut butter toast one of the top 10 most underrated breakfast foods? I'll hang up and listen to your answer. Yes, Rich. Yes, peanut butter toast is a top 10 breakfast food. I'm fine with you saying that. I'm fine with you saying that. All right, so moving forward, Auburn taking on Alabama State, a team that they should absolutely handle. You know, I'm going to be clear. I do not know a whole lot about Alabama State, but I think Auburn will be okay. I'd be shocked if Vegas even put a line out for this. I'm I'm trying to see who Alabama State played last week, and they beat TUS. That's Tuskegee? I think it is Tuskegee. 26-20 in overtime. So you got to feel good about that if you're Auburn. It'll be fun to see a little bit of a revamped Jordan-Hare Stadium. I'm curious to see what turnout will be. I think it'll be higher than it would normal if they were playing Alabama State, just because it's a home opener. But just kind of get acclimated to playing at home, because the real home opener is against LSU the following weekend. We can all agree on that, and I don't think that's crazy to say. Offensive line needs to dominate. I really think that's what's important here. And you look at it, I think you still go with the same 5 guys, despite my answer to Brad's question, is the center job open? I think you let these guys grow together. I mean, you kind of vetted them all throughout this process of naming the starting 5 guys. And Kaleb Kim, I hate to say it after just one game, but I was way too high on him. Now, his goal needs to be just, if he can become an average center in the SEC, Auburn's going to have a really good football team. Horton is going to get better because we saw it last year. It's not like it's going to get worse. Harrell is a safe and fundamentally sound guard, and I think the tackles have a crazy amount of upside with Tega and Driscoll. So, all right, that's really all I want to talk about the offensive line. Running back will be interesting. I still think Cam Martin is the starter against Alabama State, and I think he's going to do really well against Alabama State. And so I'm curious to see how the fan base will react. The fan base reacted differently to the Washington game than I thought. I think a lot of Auburn fans, and Auburn Twitter is what it is, but a lot of people acted as if Washington wasn't a good football team, and I don't really know why they did that. Washington's rated higher than Auburn going into the season, and I know that doesn't mean a whole lot, but this is a very, very good football team. Washington is in contention to make the playoff. They're probably going to have to win out. And they talked about that. They talked about that in the TV broadcast. But here's the thing: is they very well could. Like, that would not shock me at all. So you look at this Auburn team, and they figured out how to win a close game early in the season against a top 10 opponent. You play Alabama State, you kind of, figure out how to, get away with some of those penalties, limit the offsides calls, and then you take on LSU. Some people are saying that LSU will be a top 15 team. Maybe. I mean, they put it to Miami, man. They put it to them. And so let's assume they are. You beat a 6th-ranked Washington team and a 15th-ranked LSU team. You take that to the bank if you're Auburn. You take it to the bank, and I think you have to rank Auburn in the top 5 if they're able to pull that off. So, and speaking of penalties, TD Moultrie probably disappointed me the most of any, and I hate to single a kid out, but I feel like it's okay because we all expect so much of him. I think he had a rough day, in my opinion. 2 offsides calls, the roughing the passer call. I mean, those are the kind of things that lose you football games, especially in those close matchups. So TD Moultrie is a guy that I expect to get better because, we were all expecting him to be the starting buck. It ended up being Nick Coe, and we were kind of expecting Big Cat Bryant to be the number 3 guy. And I think TD Moultrie was 3rd out of those 3 guys. And I know they play different positions and moved out of the field, but let me know your thoughts on that. Am I being too hard on TD Moultrie? On Twitter at Zac Blackerby. Stay tuned. Going to give you a tease of the exclusive post-game podcast. This will be the only time I do this. I just want you guys to see what you're getting. Sign up at auburnpodcast.com. Click on Become a Patron. I'd really appreciate it, guys. Happy Labor Day. This has been another edition of the Auburn Podcast. Hey, Auburn Podcast listeners, I want to talk to you for a second about Shady Rays sunglasses. Shady Rays is an independent sunglasses company, so they do things their way. 1-2 punch warranty. You will not find a stronger warranty in the business. Free replacements if shades are lost or broken for any reason for a small shipping and handling fee. They'll replace any pair for any reason. Try that with your high-priced shades and see what they tell you. Also, Shady Rays provides 11 meals to fight hunger through Feeding America with every order placed, and they provided over 1.5 million meals to date. Their shades are polarized with 100% UV protection and are the official shades of NFL running back LaShawn Shady McCoy. You want a pair? You can buy one and get one free if you use the promo code AUBURN, AUBURN, to buy one pair of Shady Rays sunglasses and get another free. Promo code AUBURN.
If you like the podcast, you should head over to auburnpodcast.com. Zach and the gang are serving up extra Auburn sports goodness for Auburn Podcast subscribers for as low as $1 a month. Check out auburnpodcast.com.
This is the exclusive Auburn Podcast, the first post-game edition of the Auburn Podcast, and I will air chunks of this on Monday. So if you were tuning in on Monday and you're like, man, I wish I would have gotten instant recap and analysis, all you have to do is sign up for as low as $1 a month on the auburnpodcast.com. Click on Become a Patron. But yes, the game ending just minutes ago as the Auburn Tigers defeat the Washington Huskies 21-16. And really a whirlwind of emotions for Auburn fans, just kind of, keeping tabs of things on Twitter and just kind of assuming how these things are. But yeah, some takeaways. We'll get into that, as well as some guys that impressed me. But first thing this morning, we kind of wake up and get things going. Some folks are probably already in Atlanta, but notifications of Trey Adams will miss the game today. Excuse me. And obviously he's the very talented left tackle for Washington. I don't think he even traveled with the team, but had back issues. So going into it and, just looking at Auburn Twitter and kind of just thinking about it and really knowing how big of an impact he's going to have on a game, that's a big deal, especially when Auburn's strength on the team is obviously the defensive line. So that really started Auburn's way early in the day. Then, literally at the very beginning of the game, solid kickoff by Anders Carlson. Little did we know how much impact he would have in the game today. Auburn defers to the second half. They say, hey, let's start the season by putting our strength on the field, and the defense gets the 3 and out. Solid hit by Daniel Thomas. Daniel Thomas had a good game, and if you follow this podcast regularly, you know my opinions on Daniel Thomas, my thoughts and analysis on him throughout the offseason was not super kind. So he proved me wrong today. So shout out to Daniel Thomas. He's one of the guys that stood out to me today. But yeah, 3 and out, and then a great return by Ryan Davis, and then the first play offensively for Auburn was a tunnel screen to Ryan Davis, because what else would it be, And then Sal Cannella, touchdown, Auburn's first touchdown of the year, a great throw and catch. And people on Twitter were kind of screaming out like, oh, maybe he can catch now. And that was a nice one. And at that point, the hype was never really higher. And then the 2-point conversion came out. Kind of an interesting call, and that's something that I wanted to see more of. I'm cool with them going for 2. I'm not critiquing that, but Malik Willis being the quarterback there, I'm all for getting him involved. I'm actually not, but whatever. Later in the game, if Auburn had not scored a touchdown late, it really would have affected things if they would have gotten that. But kind of interesting. I'm sure that'll be broken down and nitpicked in Auburn circles throughout the week, and reach out to me. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on Auburn going for 2 there. Jamel Dean gets the pick, then second offensive drive. You start to see Stidham with some running option plays, which is something we didn't see last year. Some of it was scrambling throughout the game, but some of it we really started to see designed runs. We saw one quarterback sweep, that was interesting. We saw some that looked like reads, then saw a lot of scrambles. So that was not something I expected. I had Marcelo on the podcast a few weeks ago, and we played 20 questions, and one of the questions was, will Jarrett Stidham get 500 yards this season? And he quickly said no, which is a totally acceptable answer. And despite him running so much, I mean, he only got 23 yards on the ground today. So he's probably not going to run for 500 yards, but it does seem like they are more willing to incorporate him in the running game. Something to follow along. TD Moultrie got an offsides early and a roughing the passer on the same play, and that kind of gave Washington some life. They ended up getting a field goal on that drive. But he got called for offsides twice. And it's kind of interesting because, Nick Coe got the start there at Buck. And then you saw Big Cat late arguably make the play of the game with the sack. I'm curious to see how Tadarian Moultrie, I'm curious to see how his playing time is factored going forward. So at the half, Auburn led 15-13. And it's kind of interesting because the narrative of this game, at the top of the show, I mentioned kind of a whirlwind of emotions. But at the half, Auburn kind of had the feeling of, oh, we should be up by a lot. And then over the course of the second half, the feeling was the opposite. It was, oh, we're winning, or oh, we're only up by, 1, 2, whatever it was. So kind of interesting. So some of the guys that stood out, Jarrett Stidham, to me, is the man. He looked better than I thought. And with the offensive line looking shakier and shakier as the game went on, he powered through it. 26 for 36 on the day, 273 yards through the air. So that's 7.6 for your average. And he had a touchdown and didn't turn the ball over. The big thing for him was taking care of the football. Now, he didn't throw a whole lot of picks last year, but it was, holding on to it in the red zone, which Auburn did, which they had a lot of field goal attempts. And so let's kind of move on to the next guy. Anders Carlson impressed me. I know we went with 3 for 5 at 60%, but for that to be his first game and for him to have such an impact on the final outcome, I'm impressed with what he did. And on kickoffs, he put it out of the end zone or in the end zone every time. I'm happy with what Anders Carlson did. I really am. Dontavius Russell, absolute freak. He is better than we thought he was. And, the folks that have been on this podcast, myself included, people who have tweeted me and, been involved with the show, everyone really kind of expected him to be really, really good this year. And it's crazy to me that we live in a world where Dontavius Russell is the second best defensive tackle on this team. Derek Brown is a monster, and the combination of those guys is special, and it's going to be really, really fun to watch this year. But there were several plays where Dontavius Russell and or Derek Brown just ruined what Washington was trying to do, and it's going to be a problem for teams. And just, a quick note, and I'm going to touch on this in a second, but Washington is really good. Like, they are a top 10 football team. Noah Benogany, I know defensive backs, it's really easy to kind of point out 1 or 2 times where they either got called for a penalty or didn't turn their head around or gave up a big play. Noah Benogany can be a star in the SEC. And at this rate, considering he just started playing corner like a few months ago, he really can, if he continues to improve at the rate he's doing right now and to learn this position, he can be a star in the conference this year. I mean that. I really do. And, he got called for putting his hand on the shoulder of, the receiver, doing a crossing pattern and all that. And some of it was fair. Some of it was like, really? But he's a guy that I really do have a lot of faith and belief in. I was happy when they named him as the starter opposite Jamel Dean, who Jamel Dean is all we thought he would be as well. Playing with one hand, getting the pick early. So I think Auburn's corners are fine. It's kind of the safety spot where, like, all right, you probably need to get a little more consistent in coverage. But you look at this team, I think they should be a top 5 or 6 team next week. I really do. When you look all throughout college football this week, and I know Penn State, App State was interesting and exciting, and that just wrapped up right before I started recording this. But really outside of that and the Auburn-Washington game and, Alabama-Louisville hasn't happened and LSU-Miami hasn't happened and, Notre Dame hasn't happened. But, there's been there's been a lot of one-sided games. Most of the games have been pretty one-sided. And I think there's a lot of merit in showing voters and showing the playoff committee that you can win, one, close games that come down to the last second, and two, against a really, really talented team. And Auburn did both of those. Sure, there's an appeal to going out there and, hanging 50 on somebody and only allowing, 15 or 16 points. But I really, really think that this game is going to end up helping Auburn. And, if they don't jump in the top 5 right away, it doesn't really matter. They still got a lot of football left. But I think Auburn's going to be seen differently this year than they were last year. Let's talk about the running backs. Cam Martin, he somehow got 80 yards. I would not have guessed that until I was looking at the stats right before I started turning on the recorder. But that surprised me. 22 carries sounds about right, just as far as eye testing it. But 80 yards, one of them was for 19, averaged 3.6 yards a carry. That's not what you want. Then you look at Boobie Whitlow, 8 carries, 28 yards, 3.5 yards per carry. So his average was actually worse. But despite what the stats say, I really think Whitlow should be the starter for Auburn next week. I don't think he will. I just expected Cam Martin to be better. And it could have been a matchup thing, which is fine. I mean, Washington's defense is good. And I think a lot of folks are kind of forgetting that Washington's defense is good. But if Cam Martin's not good against this Washington defense, the matchup is going to be similar for the 2 games that matter most at the end of the year. That's how Georgia plays defense. And obviously that's how Alabama plays defense. And you can't just rely on the edges when you're running game and win the SEC. You can't. They trusted Whitlow enough to give him a Wildcat package. People on Twitter were calling it the Boobie Cat. I'm cool with it. We'll go with it. And they trusted him late with the touchdown run. And I think that says a lot. I think it says that they trust him despite him being a redshirt freshman. They didn't give Cam Martin that opportunity. Now, they gave him 22 carries, Cam Martin, to Boobie Whitlow's 8. But I think it says a lot that they trusted him, say, hey, we need you to go score this touchdown because Cam Martin's not going to do it. And I think it says something. We'll see what that means. And also, I'm pretty sure, I'm just thinking like shooting from the hip here, but I think he got the first down late to seal it to where Auburn could take a knee. Yeah, so reach out to me, curious your thoughts, and I'm sure we will dissect the running backs situation throughout the week as well. Ryan Davis, 7 catches for 52 yards. He tied for the lead in yardage over the air with Chandler Cox because of course for 52 yards, 4 catches for 52 yards. One was a key third down late, just kind of feeling the defense. So good for him on that. I think this Auburn team's going to get it together. I do. Offensive line was not as good as I thought it would be. I was off on that, and I was off on Cam Martin being good. And will they get better? I think so. I think so. J.B. Grimes is going to work with them, and they've got time to get better. Auburn doesn't play a very good team next week. They play an Alabama State team that they should be able to run the football on. Now, if they go out and, Cam Martin gets 150 yards and Auburn rushes for over 250 yards total of the game, does it mean anything? I think you could argue that it could, just from a confidence standpoint and just kind of getting things going. It's like, all right, this is what it's supposed to look like. Now let's work on trying to get to where we can do it against better teams. But then you turn around and you play LSU, a team that's not going to let you run it on them. So we'll see. And to be fair, we haven't really seen LSU yet this year at the time of me recording this. So But regardless, I mean, just from a talent and size standpoint, Auburn should have trouble running the ball if they play like they did against Washington. So I'm going to kind of part with this. Funny story. I'm recording this through my phone, and my phone has finally messed up to where I can't get it to charge, and I'm almost out of battery. So I'm gonna have to wrap this thing up. But before we get things, before I let you go, I want to remind everyone listening to this that Washington's a good team. Several people on Twitter and on social media, and message boards, it shouldn't surprise anyone, but I want to make sure that my audience of Auburn fans is in touch as they possibly can be. But Washington's a very good football team. And the fact that they skated by and they barely won, it doesn't matter. Could they have looked more crisp? Absolutely. Were the penalties ridiculous? Yes, the penalties were ridiculous. And some of them were not called for. It's just like, okay, whatever. But other aspects is like, yeah, you can't be doing that. Like, you can't jump off sides. Like, that's craziness. You gave up 103 yards in penalties. Now, Washington wasn't much better. They gave up 95 yards in penalties. They had only 2 less than Auburn. And some of it may have been the officiating crew. Whatever. But I just want to urge you, don't diss this team just because they barely beat the 6th ranked team in the country. It's a season opener. Things aren't going to be perfect. But I think when this team takes on LSU in 2 weeks at home, I think they're going to be really good. Hey, thank you to subscribing to the Auburn Podcast, and it means a ton. And I got to go fix my phone, guys. So, great win for Auburn as the Tigers defeat Washington 21-16. Have a good one, guys. I will see you on Monday. This has been another edition of the Auburn Podcast.